Alton Towers is one of the biggest and best theme parks here in the UK, with so many iconic attractions such as Nemesis, The Smiler, Oblivion and Wicker Man. You know, it's got flat rides such as Hex in there as well, one of the most iconic and unique parks in the world, with the beautiful gardens, the actual Alton Towers ruins in the centre of the park, one of the most historic parks anywhere in the world, such a good park. However, 2023 has been a very troubled season for Alton Towers in general. There's been many issues regarding some of the operations at the park, regarding the overall reliability of some rides, overall queue times, and events at the park as well. So I think that's led to an unfortunate season for the park, where it's actually getting a lot of negative press, especially when you compare it to something like Thorpe Park at the minute, which is getting a lot of positive press because of how good the season has been at Thorpe Park, combined with Hyperia, obviously their brand new coaster coming in 2024. And I think that's quite unfortunate. I think for most UK enthusiasts, Alton Towers is most people's favourite park, or, you know, at least top two up there with probably Thorpe Park or Blackpool Pleasure Beach, depending on how often you've been to each park and the memories you have at each park. But for me, it's really unfortunate. Alton Towers is my personal favourite park here in the UK, and it's had a very troubled season, I must admit. It's not got the best press around, at least in the enthusiast community. The wider community and the GP maybe not are aware of it as much, but within the enthusiast community, it's had a bit of a poor year. I'm going to get into that a bit in today's video and discuss why could that be. Are we going to hopefully see a better year in 2024? So then, if you do enjoy today's video, please do give it a like. It massively helps out the channel. Subscribe to Coasternaut for more videos like this in the future. Thank you very much for watching, and let's get into today's video. So then, Alton Towers, what have we been seeing wrong with the park in 2023, sorry. I think one thing which isn't necessarily a bad thing for the future, it will be a positive in the long run. Having Nemesis close this year, that is a fan favourite coaster at the park. One of people's sort of top two, top three for everyone. You know, Nemesis is normally up there with people, along with maybe the Smiler or Wicker Man, depending on what kind of coaster you like. But it's definitely one of the best coasters at the park. And alongside that, it's a B&M. It's an inverted coaster. It has a great capacity. So shutting off all of that capacity at the park has definitely led to longer lines on many of the other attractions throughout the park as well, and that's overall created, you know, a lot of, I don't know the quite word to use, but having such a fan favourite coaster, I imagine it's not been good for the books as well in terms of money. You know, I've not been wanting to go to Alton Towers as much this year, knowing Nemesis isn't open. It usually is one of my more favourite attractions to ride at the park, and knowing it's not there probably has cut a lot of people off from wanting to go and actually visit the park this year, unfortunately. However, I do admit, in the long run, closing Nemesis, refurbing it, creating a whole new track will be better for the ride in the long run. I think in terms of capacity, whilst we're talking about that, having the retrosquad still there, these were three sort of funfair flat rides that were brought to the park a few years ago over the pandemic to help with the reduced capacity that the park was suffering with at the time. They were brought in to help the park with capacity, but they should still not be here at this time. Alton Towers has a major flat ride issue. I have got a video on the channel discussing this in more detail if anyone is interested. You know, the park desperately needs some new modern permanent flats, thrilling flats, and family flats as well. Just so many new flat rides are needed to be added to the park, and the retrosquad, it was okay, you know, during the pandemic times. That was an exceptional circumstance that we've never seen before anywhere in the theme park amusement industry. You know, the park needed some emergency capacity. Fine, bring them in for a year, two max, but they've been here for 3 years now. Absolutely dreadful. So far out of place in such an immersive park such as Alton Towers, and they just need ripping out as soon as. Hopefully they won't be returning in the 2024 season, and I think at least in the enthusiast community now, you know, they really are starting to get on people's nerves. You're in these massively immersive themed areas with great rides such as the Smiler, such as Galactica, and, you know, right next to them you have a funfair ride. It really rips you out of the immersion of those themed areas, and they do need going ASAP. Also, in the terms of capacity though, we have two rides, and popular rides as such. One is a Hex, an indoor dark ride, and the other one is the Skyride. These two rides have been not operational for the majority of the year. Talking about Hex, first of all, that is an actual ride. This is a fan favourite ride again. It probably doesn't live up now to the likes of the Curse At Alton Manor. It probably was the best dark ride at the park when it first opened, but having Nemesis Sub-Terra open as well, Curse At Alton Manor this year, I think that is maybe not going to be the most popular dark ride in the park next year if it does reopen, but this ride seems to have had issues now for a few years, and I just think it needs to maybe close for a year or so, undergo some sort of permanent restoration work, because it really does seem to be struggling with reliability. It hasn't had you know, a prolonged period of being open for a few years now. It has struggled a lot and been suffering with a lot of downtime, and I think Hex is a fan favourite ride. Again, people love Hex. It's a very unique ride. It's a story about the local area, about Alton. You can't find a ride like Hex anywhere else in the world because it's such a unique ride to that park. It needs to be operational. Again, it's quite good for capacity, having a big ride like that, especially an indoor ride with the UK weather. If it ever does take a turn for the worse, you need those indoor rides where people can go to and get out of the rain or whatever. That is a really big issue to have Hex closed all year. As well as that, the Skyride. How can a park such a, so big like Alton Towers, it needs a Skyride system to get guests around the park, because walking from one side of the park to the other, if you're going from somewhere like Galactica over towards the back of the park near David Walliams' world, that is a 15-minute walk. That really is 10-minute walk if you're walking fast and you go through the gardens or something and you know your exact route off the top of your head. You need Skyrides open, especially for people like the GP, especially with families with buggies or disabled guests. Having a Skyride down all year really isn't good enough. It might not have an effect in terms of, I'm not going to go to the park because of Nemesis it not being open. People want to go for the rides, but just in terms of the actual infrastructure of the park, something like a Skyride does need to be open, and having that down all year is a massive unfortunate event for the park. And on a sort of personal note, I think this isn't necessarily something which can be proven. We know Hex has been down, we know Nemesis hasn't been there at the park this year, but I think something which has been arising within sort of discussions within the UK enthusiast community is just the overall operations and the staff niceness at the park. I think there's been a lot of guests reporting that the staff hasn't been the best in the past few years, and I think this year it's really took a turn for the worse. I think there's a lot of reports online of rude staff, not very helpful staff. The operations at the park seem to be much worse this year. Everyone always used to say Thorpe Park had way worse operations than Alton, and Alton always very fast with their operations. The operations at Alton Towers this year seem absolutely dreadful. Really slow operations, not getting the rides dispatched very quickly at all, and this is definitely something which needs to improve ASAP. I don't know if this is a training issue, a staffing issue, whatever it is, but operations at a park as big and as busy as Alton need to be top notch, and it's really not good enough that the park has had really poor operations this year. They were always the park over Thorpe here in the UK which had the best operations, and I think to go to a park like Alton Towers now so busy and have these long queues anyway that are just making being even slower because of the poor operations at the park is really not good enough. That is a priority for the park to fix next year. And I think shortly, I'll just get on to it before the end of the video. It's a bit of a minor point because I know not everyone's that bothered by them, but the events this year, again, I think there's been a lot of bad press about the events this year. I know Scarefest that's going on at the minute, not good enough again when you compare it to something like Fright Nights at Thorpe Park and some of the American events. Really needs a wholesale revamp. I think I'm going to do a video on that in the future. I just think the whole events, not just Scarefest, but there have been a multitude of events this year which haven't lived up to the hype, haven't lived up to the events when you compare them to other parks such as Thorpe, and I just think a wholesale revamp of the event schedule at Alton Towers is desperately needed. If you've been to Alton Towers in 2023, what have you actually made of your experience at the park? Do you think I'm making this up? Do you think, whatever the discussions you've seen personally yourself in these online discussions and forums and everything aren't actually the experience you've had? Maybe you've had a fantastic experience at the park this year. I'd love to hear your thoughts and feedback down below. If you believe Alton Towers has had a rough year, what do you think they need to improve for 2024? What would be at the top of your bucket list to help the park go in the right direction? Because at the minute, unfortunately, it does seem like the park is on a bit of a downwards trajectory, whereas in the past few years, it's been on the upwards. So let's hope we can turn things around for 2024 with the reopening of Nemesis, the 2 new Dark Quests that have opened this year. Hopefully, the Retro Squad will be removed for next season as well, and Alton Towers will be back up there as the best park here in the UK. Thank you very much for watching today's video. If you did enjoy, please do give it a like. It massively helps out the channel. Subscribe to Coasternaut for more videos like this in the future. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.